"You're a freeloader," my son said sharply at the Christmas dinner table in my own home, a home where he lived on my support. His wife nodded slightly, sharing his stance. The guest sat in stunned silence as I replied calmly, "You have until morning to leave." The next day, police knocked at the door. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and share in the comments what time it is where you are. The front door clicked behind me, and Dylan's voice cut through the warm glow of Christmas lights before I even removed my coat. "Finally showed up. Thought you got lost in your book sorting again." He lounged in my leather recliner as though it were his own, the tree lights reflecting on his phone screen as he scrolled without a glance up. 8 months of this. 8 months of coming home to find him occupying my space, my chair, my peace. I hung my coat neatly in the hall closet, water droplets from melting snow tapping the hardwood floor. My library volunteer shift had run late. Mrs. Henderson needed extra help with holiday returns. Still, I'd hurried through the cold to be home for Christmas Eve. "Good evening," I said as I stepped into the living room, adjusting my sweater. "How are preparations for tomorrow?" Stella appeared in the kitchen archway, a dish towel in hand, her back deliberately turned. Her blonde hair was pulled into a tight ponytail that made her look younger than her 32 years, more like the college student Dylan had married than the woman who'd lived in my house since April. "We'll handle tomorrow ourselves," Dylan said with a familiar edge of dismissal. "Don't need your help." The fireplace crackled softly, throwing gentle shadows across the room. I'd decorated 3 weeks earlier, garland on the mantel, the ceramic nativity my late wife Margaret had collected piece by piece. Stockings were hung with care, everything in its place, except the family beneath them. "Everything's under control," Stella added, her voice as flat as the winter street, still not turning around. I walked toward the fireplace and straightened a slightly tilted ornament on the tree. The silver bell chimed softly at my touch. Control. An interesting word choice. I wondered whose control she meant. "The Smiths are excited about tomorrow," Dylan said, finally glancing up from his phone. "Mary's bringing her famous potato salad." The words landed cold. The Smiths tomorrow. I hadn't known we were hosting anyone. Dylan raised his eyebrows in mock surprise. "Oh, didn't we mention it? Yeah, John and Mary are coming. Anne from next door. Tom from my old job too." He waved his hand as if it were nothing. "Just a few people." My fingers tightened on the ornament. Just a few people, in my house, at my table, using my dishes, drinking my wine, eating food bought with my pension. "When was this decided?" I asked. "Last week sometime." Dylan shrugged, already back to his phone. "Stella sent the invites. You were probably at the library." Of course I was at the library. I volunteered there every Tuesday and Thursday, and had for 3 years since retiring. They knew my schedule. They'd planned around my absence. The Christmas tree lights blurred slightly as I stared. Red, green, gold colors meant for celebration, yet they felt like decorations in someone else's house, someone else's life. "How many people exactly?" I asked. 6, maybe 7, Stella finally answered, her back still turned. Nothing fancy, except for the expensive groceries I'd noticed in the refrigerator all week, the costly wine bottles lined up on the counter. This version keeps the narrative intact, simplifies wording and flow, avoids unnecessary repetition, and maintains a neutral but steady tone as requested. The premium turkey cost twice what I normally spent. Dylan stretched in my chair, his feet on the coffee table I'd refinished last spring, the same table now marked by water rings from glasses he never set on coasters. "Don't worry, old man, we've got it handled." The phrase settled in my chest like a cold stone. 65 wasn't old, retired wasn't useless. This was still my house, my home, my life, wasn't it? I straightened another ornament, a small wooden angel Margaret had painted herself. The careful brushstrokes reminded me of her steady hands, her gentle way of making everything beautiful. She would have welcomed unexpected guests, smiling and creating quiet magic, but Margaret wasn't here. Hadn't been for 4 years, and I wasn't Margaret. "Well," I said softly, "I suppose I should get out of your way then." "Good idea." Dylan's eyes had already returned to his phone. "We've got last-minute stuff to finish." I stood for a moment, watching my son scroll through whatever held his attention more than basic courtesy, watching my daughter-in-law move through my kitchen as if she owned it, listening to the fire crackle in the fireplace where I'd spent countless quiet evenings reading and remembering. The stairs creaked under my weight as I climbed, each step taking me farther from the life unfolding in my living room and closer to the calm of my bedroom. Behind me, I heard Stella's voice, though not her words. Something about tablecloths and seating plans. My hand found the banister Margaret had polished every Saturday for 23 years. The bedroom door closed with a soft click, muting the voices downstairs. I paused, hand on the doorknob, listening to the sounds of preparation happening without me. Stella's steps crossed the kitchen. Dylan's voice rose briefly, then faded. I removed my shoes, placing them neatly beside the bed, and settled into the reading chair by the window. Snow fell steadily outside, each flake catching the glow of the streetlight before disappearing into darkness. Across the street, the Johnsons' house blazed with Christmas lights, multicolored strands around every window and door frame, an inflatable Santa waving mechanically in the yard. My desk drawer slid open with the familiar scrape of wood on wood. Inside, beneath retirement papers and utility bills, lay the photo albums I rarely touched. Margaret had loved organizing them. Everything chronological, labeled, carefully preserved. The first album opened to our wedding day, Margaret in white lace, radiant, despite the simple courthouse setting we'd chosen to save money. My younger self stood beside her in a borrowed suit, both of us smiling as if we'd won the lottery. In a way we had. I turned the page. Dylan at 6 months. Round cheeks, bright eyes, reaching toward the camera with tiny fists. Margaret had captured every milestone. First steps, first words, first day of school. Dylan building blanket forts in this very room at 8. Dylan at graduation, cap slightly askew, diploma held high, pride shining in every feature. The next photo stopped me. Dylan at 25, the year he became assistant manager at the furniture store. He'd called that night, voice electric with excitement. "Dad, I did it. I'm finally getting somewhere." Where had that young man gone? The one who worked double shifts, saved for months to buy Stella's engagement ring, spoke of building a life instead of borrowing one. 8 months ago he'd arrived at my door with 2 suitcases and a story about temporary setbacks. "Just for a couple weeks, Dad, until we get back on our feet." The furniture store had laid him off in March. Budget cuts, they said. Stella's hours at the salon were cut to part-time. They'd maxed out credit cards to keep up appearances. The truck payment, the apartment rent, dinners out 3 times a week because Stella said she was too tired to cook. I'd said yes, of course. They were family. You help family, but help is meant to be a bridge, not a permanent home. Downstairs, something heavy dropped. Stella's voice carried up, sharp with irritation. Dylan's reply was muffled but dismissive. The same tone he'd used with me earlier, the same tone he'd been using for months. I reached for the small notebook I kept in the drawer. Margaret had teased me about my lists, my calculations, my need to track everything. "You engineer the grocery shopping, Jasper," she used to laugh. "This rewrite keeps the original pacing and structure, simplifies phrasing for clarity, avoids repeated wording, and stays neutral yet firm where needed." But the numbers told the truth. Utility bills had climbed 37% since April. Grocery costs had doubled. Water use had tripled thanks to Stella's hour-long showers, and Dylan's habit of running the dishwasher every day, full or not. Last week I noticed a credit card bill Dylan left on the counter, $250 at an electronics shop, $300 at the mall. While I clipped coupons and bought store brands to stretch my retirement income, he bought wireless headphones and designer jeans. Notebook pages filled with calculations, 8 months of rising expenses, 8 months of watching my savings shrink, while supporting 2 adults who seemed to have forgotten responsibility. Margaret's photos smiled from the album. She had always seen the best in Dylan, defending his choices when I questioned his spending or shortcuts. He's finding his way, she'd say. Everyone finds their way differently. But this wasn't finding a way. This was choosing the easy road, one paved with someone else's sacrifices. A door slammed downstairs. Dylan's voice rose, frustrated but unclear. Stella's sharper response followed. I closed the photo album and slid it back into the drawer, along with the notebook and its growing evidence that my generosity had become enablement, that my son mistook kindness for weakness. The bedroom felt smaller, heavy with realization. My refuge had become a hiding place. My own home now felt like a retreat from people who should have been thankful for my help. Outside, snow kept falling. The Johnsons' mechanical Santa waved cheerfully to no one. Across the neighborhood, families finished Christmas Eve preparations, gathering around trees, sharing excitement for the morning. I spent mine calculating the cost of my own kindness. As night settled, the quiet felt different. Not peaceful or expectant, but like the pause before a storm. I changed into pajamas, brushed my teeth, and followed the small rituals that had steadied me since Margaret's death. Routine had once been salvation, the thin thread that held life together when grief threatened everything. Now it felt like surrender, a quiet acceptance of being pushed to the edges of my own life. The bed offered its familiar comfort, but sleep stayed distant. Downstairs I heard footsteps, a cabinet closing, the refrigerator opening and shutting. Dylan and Stella remained awake, still planning their party, celebration funded by my resources, in my house. Tomorrow would bring guests I hadn't invited, conversations I hadn't chosen, a performance of family cheer, while my own family treated me less like a father and more like a landlord, and not a respected one. The snow tapped softly against the window, each sound like a countdown. Christmas morning arrived with clattering pans and running water. I woke naturally. Decades of engineering work had set my internal clock. Through the window, fresh snow covered the yard in a clean, unbroken sheet, marked only by rabbit tracks near the fence. The hallway felt warm as I descended the stairs, heated by kitchen activity below. Stella's voice floated up as she spoke on the phone, about timing and side dishes, her tone livelier than I'd heard in months. Told them 7 o'clock sharp. Yes, Mary, I know your potato salad needs to chill. Just bring it whenever. I reached the kitchen doorway and paused. The scene resembled a restaurant opening, not a simple Christmas dinner. Stella stood at the stove, phone balanced between shoulder and ear, basting what looked like a 20-pound turkey while stirring a large pot. The counters overflowed with unfamiliar dishes, crystal serving bowls, silver platters, cloth napkins still in their packaging. Good morning, I said. She glanced over her shoulder, barely pausing in her careful rhythm. Morning, coffee's fresh. Through the archway the dining table had been transformed. My plain oak table now wore a cream tablecloth I'd never seen. 8 place settings gleamed beneath the chandelier. The good china, stored in the attic since Margaret's funeral, had been brought down and arranged without a word to me. 8 settings, not 6 or 7 as Dylan had mentioned. Stella, how many people did you invite? Dylan handled the invitations, she replied, without turning, focused on arranging 3 kinds of bread in a wicker basket. I counted again. 8 plates, 8 sets of silverware, 8 wine glasses. The centerpiece, a rich display of pine boughs, red berries and gold ribbon, must have cost more than I typically spent on groceries for a week. It would have been nice to know the exact number, I said. It's Christmas. Friends are coming. Her tone ended the discussion. The refrigerator revealed more surprises. 2 expensive bottles of wine, a cheese platter wrapped in plastic, a tray of shrimp, premium vegetables too, bundles of asparagus, tied with twine, baby potatoes, ingredients for homemade cranberry sauce. Dylan came from the living room, hair mussed, still in yesterday's clothes. Without a word, he headed for the coffee pot. Your mother and I used to cook Christmas dinner together, I said to his back. Simple meal, just family. Well, this isn't just family anymore. He poured coffee into my favorite mug, the blue ceramic one, Margaret had given me for my 60th birthday. This version keeps the structure and meaning intact, while streamlining language, trimming repetition, and maintaining a professional neutral narrative. We thought you'd want to celebrate properly, as though my quiet Christmases with Margaret had somehow fallen short. Who exactly is coming? I asked. Dylan listed names like items on a receipt. John and Mary Smith, Anne from next door, Tom Brown from the store, and his girlfriend Lisa, maybe Rick from down the street if he's free. Then as an afterthought, oh, and Stella's sister might drive in from Cleveland. 8 possible guests had become 9, all ready to enjoy food bought with my pension. This seems like quite a project for a casual Christmas dinner, I said. Stella finally turned, wooden spoon in hand, her face pink from the heat. We wanted to do something special, show people how grateful we are for, she waved vaguely around the kitchen, for everything. Grateful. The word felt hollow coming from someone who'd treated my house as her own for 8 months. The turkey alone must have cost $60. We wanted quality, Dylan said defensively. You always taught me not to cut corners. True, I had taught him that, about work, craftsmanship, building things to last, not about spending someone else's money on showy gestures. The timer beeped. Stella turned back to the oven and pulled out a tray of homemade rolls. The smell, yeast, butter, warmth, could have come from a magazine. What time are people arriving? I asked. Around 2, Dylan replied. Gives us time to finish prep and get ready. 5 hours until my quiet home would fill with near strangers. Until my living room became a set for Dylan and Stella's version of festive hosting. I refilled my coffee mug, another one, since Dylan had taken mine, and moved to the living room. The Christmas tree looked smaller, crowded by folding chairs from the basement, arranged in a half circle. My reading chair had been pushed against the wall to make space. From the kitchen doorway, I watched Stella move with steady purpose while Dylan stirred or uncorked wine. They worked together smoothly, a team on their own mission. When had they planned this? How many conversations happened while I was elsewhere? How many decisions made without the person footing the bill? The phone rang. Dylan answered brightly. Merry Christmas. Yes, everything's on schedule. Can't wait to see you. I sat in my displaced chair, surrounded by signs of a celebration I hadn't chosen, sipping coffee from a mug I didn't prefer, watching my son and daughter-in-law turn my home into their holiday showcase. The day stretched ahead like a performance I'd never agreed to but was expected to headline. I'd smile, be gracious, and play the role of generous host while my savings covered their ambitions. Outside, snow kept falling, quiet and steady. The afternoon felt endless. I retreated to my study, after seeing the kitchen transformation, trying to read, to focus on anything beyond the event unfolding downstairs. But the sounds reached every corner. Running water, clattering pans, Stella's voice directing an unseen production. At exactly 6, the doorbell rang. I rose, straightened my sweater, and went to the door. Through frosted glass, 2 figures stood bundled in heavy coats. My hand paused on the knob before turning it. Jasper, Mary Smith beamed, arms full with a covered dish and a bottle of wine wrapped in festive paper. Behind her, John stamped snow from his boots. What a lovely home. Thank you for inviting us. The words landed like a jolt. Thank you for inviting us to my own house. Of course, please come in, I said, forcing a polite smile as I stepped aside. Mary bustled into the foyer, John close behind. I took their coats automatically and hung them in the hall closet I'd organized 30 years ago. As I arranged their jackets next to mine, I wondered when I'd become a guest in my own home. Oh, it smells wonderful, Mary called from the living room. Stella must be a fantastic cook. I followed, watching her eyes move over the decorations, the family photos on the mantel, the carefully placed furniture. Everything reflected years of living here. My books, my reading glasses on the side table, the throw pillows Margaret embroidered still in their usual spots. Actually, Stella does the cooking, I said evenly. The doorbell chimed again. Ann Wilson stood on the porch with a plate of homemade cookies, her face bright with holiday cheer. Merry Christmas, dear, she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. the ease of a longtime neighbor. I brought my. This version keeps the flow and original length, simplifies word choice, removes repetitive phrasing, and maintains a neutral yet professional tone, while preserving all the critical details. Sugar cookies. Dylan said they were your favorite. When had my preferences become a topic with neighbors without me? That's very kind, I managed, taking the cookies and guiding her into the living room. The room filled quickly with coats and cheerful chatter. Tom Brown arrived last, carrying a case of beer, and looking around with approval. Dylan, you've got a beautiful place here, he called toward the kitchen, though Dylan wasn't in sight. Thanks for having me. I moved through the space, offering drinks from my own bar cart, knowing where every glass belonged, and which wine to open. Each action marked me as the homeowner, yet guests' comments gave Dylan the role of host. You've decorated so nicely for Christmas, Mary said, settling onto the sofa with a glass of wine. These ornaments look like family heirlooms. I've always loved the holidays in this house, I replied before I could stop myself. John glanced up from the family photos on the mantel. How long have you and Dylan lived here together? The question lingered like smoke. I felt every eye turn toward me, waiting for an answer that would either keep Dylan's story intact or reveal the truth. Well, it's complicated, I said at last. Before anyone could press further, footsteps sounded on the stairs. Dylan appeared in the doorway, freshly showered and wearing the expensive shirt I'd seen him buy last month with money he didn't have. Sorry I'm late, he said with bright cheer. Hope Dad's been taking good care of you. Dad, not Jasper. Dad, placing me as the helper, the background figure in my own home. Jasper's been wonderful, Anne said warmly. Such a gracious host. Dylan's smile held, but something flickered behind his eyes. Well, he certainly knows his way around the house. The guests chuckled, unaware of the edge in the remark. Of course I knew the house. It was mine. Tom raised his beer toward Dylan. Great place you've got here, man. Must be nice to have so much space. It has its advantages, Dylan replied, stepping into the center of the room. Though it gets expensive to maintain a place like this. Expensive for whom exactly? Mary noticed my silence. Jasper, you're awfully quiet. Are you all right? Before I could answer, Stella's voice called from the kitchen doorway. Dinner's ready, everyone. Come to the table. Guests rose, gathering their glasses, following Stella toward the dining room. I stayed seated a moment, watching Dylan guide them toward the carefully set table, hosting in my home with my dishes. The dining room glowed with candlelight and seasonal warmth. My oak table, where I'd carved turkeys and celebrated birthdays with Margaret, was covered with a cream tablecloth I'd never seen. The good china, untouched since Margaret's funeral, shone under the chandelier she'd chosen decades ago. Guests admired the setting and centerpiece, unaware they were witnessing the quiet removal of my authority. I moved toward my usual seat at the head of the table, the chair I'd occupied for nearly 30 years. My hand reached for it out of habit. Dylan stepped into my path. Stop. The single word cut through the conversation. Every head turned. You're not invited to this dinner table, freeloader. The silence was heavy enough to hear snow tapping against the windows. Tom's beer halted midway. Mary's hand froze on her glass. Anne's mouth formed a small circle of shock. What did you just say? My voice barely rose above a whisper. You heard me. Dylan stood taller, feeding off the startled faces. We invited real guests tonight. Mary's quiet, oh my, barely broke the stillness. I stood motionless, hands still on the chair, while my adult son blocked me like a guard at a private event. The room seemed smaller, the walls closing in as every eye focused on the scene. Maybe we should, Anne began, her voice faltering. No, stay, Dylan cut in sharply. He needs to hear this. Stella appeared in the doorway, dish towel in hand, watching without a word. When our eyes met, she gave a small, unreadable nod. The Christmas lights from the living room cast red and green shadows across faces fixed in disbelief. My table, my china, my dining room had become a stage for conflict. John cleared his throat. Son, he's your father. A father who doesn't deserve respect, Dylan said, his voice louder. All day he sits around, doing nothing, acting like he owns the place. Acts like I own the place, because I do. Tom shifted uneasily, glancing at the door as if calculating an exit. Maybe we should leave. Don't leave because of him. Dylan waved a dismissive hand toward me, treating me like an unwanted guest. This is our dinner party. Our dinner party, in my house, with my dishes, funded by my pension. Mary reached for Dylan's arm. Dylan, please, maybe stop. It's Christmas. No. His response was sharp enough to make her flinch. He needs to know his place. All day he does nothing. Does nothing, while I volunteer at the library, keep the house, pay the bills, and help cover their expenses with my retirement savings. The candles flickered in Margaret's holders on Margaret's table. She would have been horrified by this display. This break from every value she taught Dylan. Dylan, Anne said, her tone firm with disapproval. This is making everyone uncomfortable. He's made me uncomfortable for months. Dylan shot back, gesturing toward me. Living here like he owns the place. Living here like I own the place. The irony nearly made me laugh. Silence stretched across the room, thick and uneasy. Around the table Dylan's guests sat frozen, unwilling witnesses to a family confrontation they never imagined. Stella remained by the doorway, still silent, her presence a quiet endorsement. I stayed standing beside my displaced chair. All eyes focused on me, waiting. The only sounds were the soft hiss of candles and snow against the windows. Dylan remained planted by the chair, chest lifted with forced authority, energized by the attention. Mary tried again, gentle but steady. Dylan, please, it's Christmas. He pulled away from her touch. No, he needs to know his place. He just sits around, does nothing. John eased back from the table, calm but firm. Son, he's your father. A father who doesn't deserve respect. Dylan repeated, his voice carrying across walls that had heard decades of family talk but nothing like this. Living here like he owns the place. Anne shifted, her face tight with concern. This is making everyone uncomfortable. He's made me uncomfortable for months. Dylan insisted, turning to the guests as if appealing to a jury. Every day I come home and there he is, sitting in my living room, reading my books, watching my television. My living room, my books, my television. Each word landed like a blow. Tom set his beer bottle down carefully, the small sound loud in the heavy silence. This version keeps the structure and key points intact while tightening phrasing, reducing repetition, and keeping the professional, neutral tone you asked for. The sound echoed in the tense silence. Maybe we should leave. Don't leave because of him, Dylan said, his voice cracking with urgency, as though he sensed his story was failing. This is our dinner party, our house, our life. But Mary wasn't convinced. Her eyes moved from Dylan to me, noting my calm posture, my ease in the space, the way I naturally knew where everything belonged. Jasper, she asked quietly, whose house is this? The question lingered like a sharp edge. Dylan's face reddened. We all live here together. It's complicated. No, Mary said, her voice steady. It's not complicated. Whose name is on the deed? That doesn't matter. Dylan stammered, his confidence slipping. John stood slowly, his height lending quiet authority to the charged room. Dylan, you just called your father a freeloader in what appears to be his own home at Christmas dinner. You don't understand, Dylan said loudly. He acts like some generous patriarch, but he controls everything, every penny, every decision, every moment of our lives. Controls everything, while he and Stella used my money for designer clothes and elaborate dinners. How long have you been living here? Anne asked, cutting through Dylan's rising frustration. We're not. Dylan looked around, his story crumbling. 8 months, he admitted finally. But it was supposed to be temporary. 8 months, Tom repeated slowly. Rent-free? Stella finally spoke from the doorway, her voice barely a whisper. We're getting back on our feet. On whose feet? Mary asked sharply. Who pays the mortgage, the utilities, the food for this dinner? The questions landed one after another. Dylan's face shifted, anger, embarrassment, then desperation. You all don't understand, he burst out. It's not that simple. Life is complicated. What's complicated? John said quietly, is disrespecting your father in his own home, in front of guests he didn't invite. Dylan's claim to authority was unraveling. Volume and aggression couldn't mask the truth revealed by calm questions and steady observations. He's controlling. He makes us feel like children. You're acting like children. Anne replied, her voice carrying the weight of experience. Grown adults should pay their own way. The words struck Dylan hard. His expression twisted with anger, the mask of host gone. Don't lecture me. You don't know what it's like. I know what respect looks like, Mary said firmly. And this isn't it. Dylan turned toward me, pointing. Look at him, just standing there pretending to be the victim. I remained still, letting his words hang, allowing the guests to see who was truly disrupting the evening. The contrast was clear. Dylan's agitation against my quiet composure. The dining room felt like a courtroom awaiting a verdict. Dylan stood beside my chair, chest rising from the effort of his outburst, while 8 pairs of eyes turned to me for a response. He had cast me as the controlling patriarch, the burden. I faced the guests instead. Freeloader. My voice was measured, precise. Dylan, remind everyone who pays for this house. That's not important, he said, voice breaking slightly. Who bought the food for tonight's dinner? I continued, still addressing Mary, John, Anne and Tom. Who pays the electricity for these lights, the gas heating this room, the water in those glasses? John shifted in his seat. Mary's eyes moved from Dylan to me, connecting the pieces. You're embarrassing yourself, Dylan interrupted, his voice sounding strained. I gestured toward his shoes. Those $300 sneakers, are those my fault too? Dylan's face flushed deeper. Stop it. The designer jeans, the expensive watch, I said evenly. 8 months of groceries, utilities, insurance. Should I get the receipts? You don't understand, Dylan said, turning to the guests for support that wasn't there. He controls everything. Mary set down her wine glass carefully. Dylan, whose name is on the deed to this house. The question struck hard. Dylan opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. No answer. This is his house, Anne said quietly, the realization clear in her voice. Isn't it? Tom added, glancing around at the family photos, the decades of settled comfort, the unmistakable history in every corner. How long have you been living here? John asked simply. 8 months, I answered, when Dylan stayed silent. Rent-free, they planned to stay a couple of weeks to get back on their feet. A small sound escaped Stella. Half gasp, half groan. A couple of weeks, Mary repeated slowly. 8 months ago. The math was simple. Guests exchanged glances, silent understanding passing between them. Dylan, Anne said, her voice filled with maternal disappointment. You called your father a freeloader in his own home. You don't understand the situation, Dylan said again. But his words were hollow now. I understand perfectly, Tom said quietly. He looked at me with something like respect. You've been supporting them for 8 months. The silence that followed was different. Less shock, more realization. The guests looked at Dylan's expensive clothes with new eyes, understanding the dinner's real cost, noticing how naturally I moved through my own home. Those credit card bills you left on the counter. I continued, still addressing the guests. $12,000 in debt, while living in my house, eating my food, using my utilities. Dylan's color drained as his story collapsed, piece by piece. He makes us feel like children. Dylan tried again, weaker now. You're acting like children, Mary said firmly. Adults should pay their own way. The words struck him like a final blow. He staggered slightly, looking around at the faces that had begun the night as friends, and now held only quiet judgment. John stood. This rewrite preserves the length, structure, and key points, while simplifying language, removing unnecessary repetition, and keeping a professional, even-handed tone. John rose slowly, his height lending quiet authority to the suddenly tense room. I think we've heard enough. The dining room, once the stage for Dylan's display of confident hosting, now felt like a courtroom, the verdict already decided. Dylan glanced around, searching for support that no longer existed, realizing his humiliation was complete and unmistakable. "This isn't over," he muttered. But the words fell flat. 3 silent heartbeats later, his chair scraped harshly against the wood floor. As he leapt up, the sound sharp and jarring. He slammed his fists onto the table, making plates rattle and glasses quiver. "Enough," he shouted so loudly. Anne flinched. Mary clutched her chest. Tom half stood, protective. "Go to your room now." His command meant to embarrass me, and reclaim control rang through the candlelit dining room. Dylan pointed toward the stairs like a parent scolding a child. I stayed still. The contrast was unmistakable. Dylan flushed and agitated, gesturing wildly. Me calm and steady. Guests sat frozen, witnessing a family argument turning into something much more public. John cleared his throat. "Dylan, maybe you should. You don't understand." Dylan spun toward him, eyes fierce. "I'm in charge here. This is my house." But the claim sounded thin and forced. Everyone knew otherwise. "Dylan," Mary said gently, concerned. "Please sit down." "I will not sit down in my own dining room." He began pacing like a caged animal, fists tight. "He sits there pretending to be innocent, but he controls every penny, every decision, every part of our lives." From the kitchen doorway, Stella shifted uncomfortably, torn between loyalty and alarm. "He needs to learn respect," Dylan insisted, his voice breaking. "Go upstairs, now." The silence was heavy. 8 people waited to see what would happen next. I spoke only when his echo faded completely. "You have until morning to move out." My voice was quiet and firm. No anger, just fact. The words struck Dylan like a blow. He stopped pacing, mouth open. "What? We're not going anywhere. You have until morning. You can't make us leave." I faced him directly for the first time. "This is my house." Shock, anger, disbelief, panic, all passed across his face. "You can't. We don't have anywhere to go. It's Christmas. You should have thought of that before calling me a freeloader at my own dinner table." The guests watched as Dylan's world unraveled. Tom reached for his wife's hand. Mary covered her mouth, eyes wet. "Please," Dylan's voice cracked. "Dad, please, we can talk about this." But I had already turned toward the stairs. Decision made. "Until morning," I repeated without looking back. Behind me, silence stretched like a held breath, broken only by the soft sound of my steps and someone, maybe Stella, beginning to cry. Dylan's carefully planned Christmas dinner had become his undoing, and it wasn't even 8 p.m. Each creak of the staircase carried me farther from Dylan's outburst and closer to the calm of my bedroom. Downstairs, frantic whispers overlapped as guests processed what they had seen. I closed my door with a quiet click, leaning against it, listening to the muffled sounds below. Dylan's high, panicked voice, Stella's sobs, the scrape of chairs. I removed my dinner jacket and hung it carefully beside suits worn to Margaret's funeral. Dylan's graduation, retirement parties, birthdays. The simple act of putting away formal clothes felt like shedding a role I never agreed to play. The chair by the window welcomed me. Through it I saw the driveway, the street, and neighbors' lights twinkling. Unaware of the evening's turmoil, car doors slammed outside as guests left, headlights cutting across the snow. One by one they drove away. Tom, then John and Mary, then Anne across the street, eager to escape the chaos. The house grew quieter. Below, Dylan and Stella argued. Something crashed, then her pleading voice tried to salvage what remained. For 35 years I'd waited for Dylan to grow up, listened to Margaret's steady faith that he'd find his way. But time had run out. 8 months of supporting him, while he spent recklessly and treated me like a guest in my own home, was enough. Snow fell silently outside. The Johnsons' inflatable Santa waved in the yard, oblivious. Christmas would continue tomorrow, no matter this family dispute. Around 9, the house finally stilled. No more arguing or crying, only quiet. Whether they'd given up or retreated to plan, I didn't care. For the first time in months, I felt true peace, my own space, my own decisions. Tomorrow would bring consequences, but I was ready. Dylan might test the ultimatum, But I'd spent 40 years solving problems. This one had a clear solution: removal. By 10, the neighborhood was calm, homes glowing with tree lights and normal celebrations. I would have a normal Christmas again, starting tomorrow. The house settled into winter silence. Morning brought a new quiet, no footsteps or running water. The clock read 10 a.m., 2 hours past the deadline. I showered and dressed with deliberate care, pressed slacks, a collared shirt, the leather belt Margaret gave me on our 20th anniversary. Each motion felt ceremonial, preparing for an inevitable conclusion. Descending the stairs, sunlight highlighted the remains of last night's dinner, wine glasses half full, plates of cold food. Margaret's china stained with gravy. Dylan's leather jacket hung on my chair, its $200 price tag etched in memory. Stella's costly cosmetics cluttered the bathroom counter upstairs. I brewed coffee in a kitchen still scented with turkey and listened for movement. Nothing. They were sure I wouldn't act. But the decision was firm. I sat at the kitchen table with a clear view of the hallway. The house felt larger, as if their absence already created space. Outside, neighbors adjusted Christmas lights, living ordinary lives. The coffee, an expensive blend Dylan favored, was a small irony. I'd enjoy it after they were gone, a quiet victory. At 11 sharp, floorboards creaked overhead. Voices murmured. The toilet flushed. Finally awake, likely plotting strategy. I waited. Dylan came down in silk pajamas I knew cost $70. Hair rumpled. He carried himself as though nothing had changed. "Morning, Dad," he said, padding into the kitchen. "Coffee smells good." I watched him pour a cup into the mug. Margaret once painted with "World's Best Husband." Another small trespass. "Sleep well?" I asked. "Yeah," he replied casually. "Last night got pretty heated. You know how holidays are, people stressed, emotions high." He brushed off the scene, as if it were just seasonal tension. "Pretty heated," I echoed. "Exactly. But it's Christmas morning. Well, the day after." He gestured toward wrapping paper littering the floor. "Time to move on. Family's family. Family's family," I repeated. "So everything's fine now?" "Of course. We had a fight. It happens. Everything's fine." I studied him over my coffee cup. He looked relaxed, already planning to charm his way out. "Fine will be when you've moved out." The words landed like stones in still water. Dylan's confident smile flickered. "Dad, come on. You can't be serious about that deadline." "I'm serious." He laughed, forced. "It's been 14 hours. You expect us to pack and find a place overnight. I expected you to start last night. Where are we supposed to go? Day after Christmas, nothing's open." His tone shifted to pleading logic. I stood, set my cup down, and faced him. "You had 8 months to find a place." "We've been trying," he insisted smoothly. "Jobs are scarce, rent is high, we need more time." "You've had time." His composure cracked. "So what if we don't leave? What's your plan?" I reached for the wall phone. His eyes followed, confidence draining. "Dad, this is ridiculous. We're family." My hand wrapped around the receiver. "Stop," he said quietly. "Think about this." I had been thinking for 8 months. The time for thought was over. Police arrived in 23 minutes, quicker than expected. 2 officers, one young and close-cropped, the other older and calm, stood on the porch. "Sir, we received a call about a property dispute," the older one said. "Yes, I need help removing unauthorized occupants from my home." I handed over the folder. "Deed, mortgage, utilities, all in my name. They have no lease and refuse to leave." Dylan appeared behind me, still in those pricey pajamas, face pale. "Officer, this is crazy. He's my father. We just had a family argument." The younger officer checked my papers while the older listened. "Sir, are you the sole owner?" "Yes. My late wife and I bought it in 1987. Paid off for 12 years. They were guests, but that ended last night." The officers exchanged a knowing glance. "Sir," the older one told Dylan, "you need to collect your belongings and leave. This is insane. We've lived here 8 months. The owner may remove unauthorized occupants. You have no lease or rental contract," the officer explained. Stella appeared at the stairs, robe wrapped tight, face swollen from tears. "How long do we have?" she asked softly. "Gather essentials now. the officer replied. Arrange for the rest later. The next hour passed with methodical efficiency. Dylan shifted between anger and pleading, but legal authority couldn't be charmed. Officers oversaw as boxes and bags came out. Stella gathered cosmetics. 8 months of slow takeover undone in 60 minutes. Neighbors emerged to watch. Mrs. Henderson walked her dog past twice, eager for details. This isn't over, Dylan muttered while loading the last box. You think you've won, but this isn't over. His words hung in the cold air, empty against the backdrop of police and paperwork. Have a safe trip, son, I said. They drove off, Dylan revving the engine in futile defiance. The officers finished their notes, advised me about restraining orders if needed, and left with professional courtesy. Silence filled the house. I stood amid the remains of Christmas dinner, finally free of the weight of 8 long months. On the coffee table lay Dylan's expensive watch, forgotten. I picked it up, felt its weight, and set it on the porch. He could return for it if he chose. Afternoon sunlight streamed through windows that were fully mine again, across rooms that belonged to me alone. The quiet wasn't emptiness, it was possibility. Tomorrow I'd start cleaning up. Tonight, I would simply enjoy being home. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for watching. This version keeps the structure, simplifies where possible, avoids repeated phrasing, and preserves all key arguments and events, while changing only a small portion of the wording.